So first up, we have Josh Spear and Caitlin Rowley.
Thank you. I'm Caitlin Rowley,
And my name is Josh Spear.
and we are members of the composer-performer group Bastard Assignments with our colleagues Timothy Cape and Edward Henderson. And over the past year and a half, we've been creating a series of pieces made for and within the online environment, the lockdown drams. And we've also worked on other online projects. Our presentation today is a video which we're going to share in the link for in the chat now. Josh is going to outline the Lockdown Jams project, and then we're going to discuss other network collaborations we've experienced recently. So please mute your microphones and then rejoin us here at the end of the video for the next session. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I absolutely love the format of your video. It was really insightful. And yeah, so we'll ask the questions afterwards at the end of the next two presentations. If anyone has any comments or questions that they'd like to ask, please do pop them into the chat now. And we shall move on to Sophie and Casey Grieve.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'll be getting my PowerPoint up very shortly. So hello from New York, everyone. My name is Joe Sfera, and I will be presenting here with my colleague Casey Greve about our piece 6 Miles for clarinet and alto saxophone. We both teach at the Crane School of Music at SUNY Potsdam in Potsdam, New York. As a composer, I'm still quite new to telematic music. I came to it in the wake of COVID-19 as an attempt to continue to be creative and productive during the 2020-2021 school year. I composed and performed my first telematic piece as a commission from the ACAD Sonic Arts Ensemble, and you can hear from directors Marc Auger and Ann Stimpson tomorrow. Casey and I socialized outside. We went on a lot of walks in the fall of 2020 in an attempt to stay social, not go insane, but also to stay safe. And I shared with him my experience of writing telematic music for the first time. And in a response to that, he asked me to write a piece for us for his spring 2021 recital, him on saxophone and me on clarinet. We resolved to record the piece telematically, but to then process the audio slightly for the final video. One of our primary motivations for making this piece was to model a responsible type of distance collaboration for our students and peers during the pandemic. I began composing the piece in December of 2020, and we recorded in March of 2021. I had gotten my COVID vaccine that day, and we were very lucky that we weren't recording the next day because I was weighed out for a while, but we got it in just in time. Casey premiered the video at his recital in April. The title 6 Miles is a tribute to the distance between us when we rehearsed and recorded the piece. Me in my home office, which is where I am now, and Casey in his office at Crane, where he is now. I will outline some of my compositional process here and discuss our tech and software setup, and then Casey will speak about our collaborative process. By giving this talk, we hope to encourage others to pursue telematic collaboration. I've had a good time doing this, and I hope other people have felt the same way. The first question when I began writing this piece was, how am I going to address latency? Chris Chafe stated at the AES 43rd International Conference that latency can either be ignored, tolerated, or exploited. And I thought distinctly about trying to write a piece that exploited latency and succeeded because of the medium, not despite of it. My solution in both my piece for Sonic Arts and for Casey and me was a unison canon. The piece is structured as a single line of music that is exactly the same for both of us. Casey plays the line first, and this is just a hypothetical line. This isn't what the actual score is, or even it's not really an approximation of the actual score. But imagine that this Casey is playing this line of music, and then I come in a second or two later. And the thought is, because of the instability of strict metric timing that comes with latency, I never came in at the exact same spot during rehearsals. but I wrote the line of music in such a way that the exact timing wouldn't necessarily matter. The two versions of the line of music happening right after one another create a varied and interesting sonic texture that is a little bit different in virtually every rehearsal and recording. Passages in the piece sometimes sound like an electronic digital delay, and sometimes more like a complex rhythmic texture that you might hear in the work of a composer like Ruth Crawford Seeger or Bonita Marcus. So I made several decisions about the line of music that we both shared so that the piece would work in this context. And a big feature of this, a big feature of the line that hopefully you'll hear is inexact repetition. Or oh my gosh, that's unexact repetition. We're at an academic conference. For instance, in the first section, the line frequently returns to an alternating major second. You have this at the top in the first measure there. I can't see my mouse for some reason. We have these return to GA, and GA keeps coming back a lot. But each time it comes back, the meter is a little bit different, and the number of times that the GA is played is a little bit different. The result of this then is that in the performance is that Casey and I are playing the same notes, but they're from different parts of the line. And the sonic result then is unsynchronized and jagged, but it remains so consistently jagged that it feels deliberate. So here's a little snippet of the opening. And so on. We'll get the whole thing very soon. Our tech setup was deliberately quite simple. We rehearsed and recorded with the software Jamulus, our reasoning being that it was straightforward to use. I had performed with Nettie McNetface with Sonic Arts and was eager to venture out and learn another software. I ran a private server in Jamulus, and we rehearsed and recorded there while recording video over Zoom. Jamulus records the audio as separate stems for each player, which I then imported into Ableton, applying panning, reverb, and compression. As you'll likely hear, there are quite a few pops in the audio, results of inconsistencies in our internet connection. While in our video, we flipped the script, stating that we deliberately left in the pops as artifacts of the medium, I wish that we had instead recorded separately into our own computers, simply using Jamulus as a telematic monitor or something like that. That being said, I'm still quite pleased with what we came up with. And here's Casey to share some thoughts about our rehearsal process. I'm going to hand things over to him.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we collaborated and some of the sort of challenges and successes, and eventually, how we made this a really fun, a fun experience for both of us. So one fortunate thing about this collaboration is that we had the time to devote to familiarize ourselves with the technology and the experience playing telematically well before we had to sort of present a finished product or a recording. When we started jamming, Joe hadn't started writing 6 Miles yet. Every week we would meet, and we made a point to improvise in each of these meetings. And I remember using our early jams to figure out what kind of musical material worked well for us to communicate effectively together across this platform. Gradually, Joe would bring in sketches of different sections of what became 6 Miles. Our weekly rehearsals gave us time to find what types of materials worked well for this concept and what did not. With our setup, we would experiment sometimes with using Zoom and Jamulus together so we could see each other, and other times we would only rehearse using Jamulus. Casey can be louder. Is that better? Or I can be closer to the mic. So we would experiment sometimes with Zoom and Jamulus to see each other, and other times we would only rehearse on Jamulus. As a musician that tends to move a lot with the music when I play and likes to see how others move when they perform, I noticed I missed seeing how Joe would approach playing different gestures. There was a bit of a trade-off here, though. Zoom did cause a longer latency and more pops and jumps in the audio for Jamulus, but an energetic or sometimes exhausted breath or cue would really help. Even with the video, understanding and reacting to what the other was doing at times was challenging, especially in our improvisations, because the sound was not necessarily as enveloping or connected physically to what the other player was doing via latency. Performing with headphones on does not necessarily give a full accounting of what someone sounds like live in a space, and we had to be especially careful with the gain in our instruments, even as you're experiencing this now. As some of you may know, the saxophone and clarinet can be quite piercing, and especially with some of the features, with some of how this piece is written, it made it quite easy for us to clip on the microphones. So at times I felt like the intensity of our playing and sound may not have sort of come across to each other as consistently. I really enjoyed Joe's single line concept. I think it worked really well. And the flexibility of Joe's part and how far behind he would follow as he sort of demonstrated visually to you would sometimes be compounded by the latency and the sound sort of jumping. On Jamulus, you can actually see how many milliseconds or like the distance you are sort of away from each other. And sometimes this would cause pops and jumps. It would also, sometimes when the sound would jump, it would cause the other to react and try to sort of adjust our part. These struggles would sometimes lead us to some uncertainty at the end. When we would finish a run, at times only one of us would notice that we lined up, or that one of us jumped so our cannon got too close or far away from each other. So we always had to have a little debriefing session at the end. Keeping this sort of close but not too close canon was really fun for me and made for a really enjoyable and exciting way to collaborate and perform with Joe outside of our walks through beautiful Potsdam, New York, right outside of the Adirondacks. That said, please enjoy our performance of 6 Miles. And share sound.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sharon Casey. That was really beautiful, and it was really interesting to hear about your process as well. If anyone has any questions or comments, please do pop them in the chat now. And now we are going to hear from Jason Zay.
Hi everyone, my name is Jason Zay. I'm a performance artist currently working out of Morgantown, West Virginia in the United States. The piece that I'm going to share with you is called I Have Been a Loveheim, and I don't want to over explain it before I share it with you, but I do want to give a little bit of context. So over the past 7 or so years, I've been creating a lot of performance works that are striving to achieve what I might call a kind of cyborg intimacy. And this goal is based on the idea that one of the seemingly innate features of human existence is that we're continually striving to extend the capabilities of our bodies by creating technologies that sort of allow us to do things that we would not be able to do otherwise. And so a lot of my work deals with adapting or transforming readily available consumer electronics and incorporating them into these performance works that have a sense of cyborg intimacy to them. Over the past few years, I've been doing a number of performance works where I trained a machine learning algorithm to generate secrets that I've been using in performance. And during COVID, I've been taking those secrets and using them in a Zoom context for these kinds of video performances. One of the things that I probably, like a lot of people, found myself doing during COVID lockdown was, maybe doing things around the house that I had been intending to do for a long time, but never had time to do. And one of those tasks that I started doing early on is I finally installed this Ring smart doorbell, surveillance camera doorbell, that we had gotten as a gift. And shortly after installing this thing, we were sitting out on our porch and sort of playing around with the live video feed and listening to the kind of echoes and feedback from the built-in microphones and speakers in the doorbell. And immediately my partner was like, so how long is it going to be before you make this into art? So the piece that I'm sharing today is the fourth in a series of performance works using the Ring smart surveillance doorbell. So here we go. I have been a Loveheim.
You have 14 old messages. Friday, 11:08 p.m.
Hey, Mom, I was just calling. If you want to call me when you get home, or I can call you tomorrow or something. Whichever you prefer. Love you. Love you. Bye.
Anyhow, whatever. Okay, I have been a Loveheim.
I have been a Loveheim.
Friday, 2:37 p.m.
Hello, Mom and Dad. This is your son. I'm speaking to the answering machine because you know that you sometimes don't answer the phone around lunchtime. So I'm going to give you some time to see if maybe you want to talk to me. If not, that's okay too. Alright, bye.
Tuesday, 8:15 p.m. Friday, 7:04 p.m.
Happy Mother's Day to you. Happy Mother's Day to you. I'm on the way to you, and I hope to see you soon. Happy Mother's Day,
Happy
Mom.
Mother's Day, Mom. I love you.
I look forward to seeing you guys.
And
You have a good Mother's Day.
hope you have a good Mother's Day.
Thank you.
See
I love you.
I love you. Bye.
Wednesday, 2:06 p.m.
Early, there when I want to have to the she someheim.
Some him.
And something that I've never really have a convention. I don't know what to do it all the thing on me. I don't know how to do. I always have to be here, and then she wants to see her a lot. I was a couple of me.
I've been that in that I was and to have been a Santa. She would be
to D, and I
was have B, and the has for
has a
and
for,
he
and
a
he
say,
and a
and
say.
I was the
And
that I have
I
to get
was
to
the
have,
that I have to
but I
get
was to
to
that.
have, but I was to that.
And I can talk anything about it, and I'm not a rather things, and I can talk to her, and I could have the best friend of him. He has a bit of the same time to see me that I could be hissing.
I was to go to her day.
They,
I was a fur and I
was
want
a
to,
fur
but
and
I have been a so
to
Tom.
have,
And the
but
here
I
and
have
I
been
seat
a
that I
so
want to
Tom,
the
and the here
go to
and I
that.
seat
I have
that
been a
I
love heim.
want to.
Monday, 9:59 a.m. Wednesday, 2:33 p.m. Saturday, 4:11 p.m.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mom. Happy birthday to you.
Monday,
I love you, Mom.
5:59 p.m.
Hopefully I get to see you soon.
Hello,
Mother and Father. I don't know if you heard that I called on Father's Day, but now I'm calling again for Dad's birthday. And I did not get a hold of you on Father's Day, so I'm not going to make that mistake again. I will take this time to fully wish you a happy birthday, and I will sing you a happy birthday song. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Daddy. Happy birthday to you. I'll call you on the other phone, and I'll keep calling until you pay attention.
And that's nothing. I'm a strang, and I can't see the parents, and that I want them to talk and says. I don't want to be to stay to her. She seemed to say she was a broccoli things, and I don't know, he want to believe it. It's not to see her and to be here, and I can't see her a lit of them, that I can't have to be a letter.
I had to see that he was, and that I was a lot that I want to, that I was a for that it. I has to got to her, that I have to her the to do.
Have been
the have been that.
A love,
He've have been
that
he had a love.
I don't want to be too much.
The sum that it was a so the should.
But I was this, and the sum to
I
that
have,
I
but
have
I
to
was
he,
the sum, and
a
the sum
got
to that I
for,
have
and
to
the
he,
she was
a got
sir
for,
to he,
and the she was a sir to he, and the haze, and I had to he.
And
I can't see her the back to my ex, who is a child of my child, and
a got he a fiend, a light.
I was just calling because Mom had asked about trying to talk on the phone this weekend, and I was wondering if you wanted to talk. I'm off today. So I was going to try to talk to you all.
But I guess no one is there.
Okay. So maybe I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.
Thursday, 12:17 p.m. Hello, parents.
This is your son. I was just calling to wish you a happy Easter. And maybe you all are still at church or something of that sort. Okay, bye.
Sunday, 11:21 a.m.
Hello, parents. This is your son. Hello. Are you there? Perhaps Dad is sitting in his chair somewhere and is wondering if he'll be able to get up in time to answer the phone before I hang up. Maybe. Or maybe Dad's still sleeping, and that's okay too. Anyway, I was calling to see how you guys are doing and to talk about possible visits in the future.
Near future.
Hopefully we can do that someday. All right, love you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
The she some he her alike he was, and has to go her and see him aid, and I would add to God. The but I was they what I have been to the.
I don't know how to, but I don't want to see the time. I don't know. I would be a couple of the bathroom, and I'm confession of this. I don't know what the fact that I can't stop them anything.
You're difficult tonight. Okay.
Start over.
Monday, 6:50 p.m.
Hello, parents. This is your son. I was calling to talk to you. Are you there? Do you love me? Hello? Hello? Goodbye.
Tuesday, 6:59 p.m.
Hello, parents. Are you there? Hello? I imagine that Dad is probably there, or maybe he's somewhere else. Are there any cats there that want to talk to me? Hello? 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 So I'm calling because I have an idea and I was wanting to some of these shifts that I leave for you, and answering machine messages. Answering machine. I will call you back later. Bye.
Heim, 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 Heim,
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. I found that really, really moving. So now we are going to move on to some questions. If you have any questions for Jason, do pop them in the chat now and we will move on to those in a little bit. But first, we are going to have questions for Josh and Caitlin. Just bear with me because I'm going to copy and paste them in the chat as well. So this is a comment from Jason saying, I like this question about what liveness is online. Let's come back to that. So that's the first point. And also collaborate with our own past seems to be a recurring theme. Do you have any comments that you want to discuss on those?
Well, I think the question of liveness it's a really big one, and it's one we've kind of delved into a bit. We've actually got an article coming out later this year where we go into it in more detail. I think where we've ended up, though, with that is, I mean, the definition of liveness has changed in response to sort of society and technologies ever since it first started to be used in, well, Philip Auslander says the 1930s is the first occurrence of that idea of live music. Yeah, and I mean, when we sort of shift to the online environment, it kind of makes sense that a definition of liveness might change with that shift too. Auslander talks about Nick Coldry's work on online liveness, which suggests that liveness might still be produced without either physical or temporal co-presence of participants in a group, as long as there's a sense of co-presence, a sense of being together among the group. What I've found with this is that this idea of being on Zoom together, and indeed also in Mozilla hubs to a certain extent, when you're with other people in hubs, even though you can't see them, you can interact with them. And that sort of being in the moment, being all together, is certainly to me kind of the essence of liveness, and that the live streaming aspect of having the audience being co-present with us, because we're in this situation that it's kind of the first time, I guess, where on a sort of very large scale, we've been in this situation where it's not just a question of, is the audience there with us, but are we with each other? Because so often we're just not. And you sort of look at virtual choir recordings and things like that, where everybody is separate from everybody else, and the only place they come together is in the edit suite. But when we're doing things like, I mean, the fugue that was in our presentation and all those sort of hand gestures, and all of that was done live. We were all in that one digital space at the same time doing the same thing. Yeah, and so for us, that's very much the sense of live, and whether the audience is there, it's a different thing, but it's not necessarily more live. We did a live stream performance of Alexander Schubert's Browsing, Idling, Investigating, Dreaming. And for me, that actually felt a bit less live than the version we did where it was just us, and like our complete audience was us, and we could sort of see each other and sort of chat to each other while it was happening. Yeah, so there's a lot of sort of aspects of that. Josh, do you have anything to add on that?
Don't have much to add on that. You said it very well, but I think the point was we were doing it as live as we could possibly do it, and so then that became the new definition of liveness, just being sort of temporally co-present, whether there was a live audience or not. Yeah, I agree.
Excellent.
Thank you. So you gave a really interesting differentiation between collaboration, contribution, and hierarchy. What would you consider true collaboration to be? Is that possible? And is it something that you strive for with Bastard Assignments?
Josh, do you want to grab this one?
Yeah, I think first of all, each of us works in a very different way with the group. Yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail there, but we all are very much contributing to each other's stuff, particularly with examples of Caitlin's solo work and also Tim's solo work. They are not just sort of solo works that they've made, but we've really contributed to them as a group and torn them up, contributed material. We do this kind of what do we call it? Where Caitlin might show us the material, then one of us will perform to Caitlin back the material. This might be what contribution is. Collaboration, I wouldn't know how. I think there's different shades of collaboration, and we each find our own way. I'd have to think about what if there is a true collaboration, if it's possible. The way we seem to need to work is there needs to be one person bringing the idea and being a kind of project lead for it. Ultimately makes the final decision, but has to be kind of open for the Bastard Assignments mill, basically, to churn it up. I don't know if Caitlin wants to add to that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Certainly so far it's worked best for us to have one person kind of in charge, and we all sort of throw things in, but then ultimately someone has to make a decision about whether something is in or out. But yeah, there's a sense of a lot of, that everybody's opinion is equally valid. It's just that something needs to be chosen at the end of it. Yeah.
I also feel we create for each other rather than abstract people. So in that way, one's abilities feed back into someone else's compositional process. I think for example, Ed writes much more instrumental music for us, and he writes for our particular ability playing an instrument rather than abstract clarinet line. It's Josh on clarinet.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's very much bound up in the people and what we can do and what we bring. And we've worked together for so long now as well that we can almost, we can hear each other's voices in our heads. And I know the kinds of things that Ed's going to say before I've even got to the meeting about the ideas I've brought. That we have sort of all sorts of in-jokes about, Caitlin brings a multi-movement piece and Ed tells her it should only be one movement, that kind of thing. So we can see this stuff coming, and it's part of the collaboration. It's a sort of an aspect of collaboration that happens without being physically present, and it's not just for now. That's for always. That we can preempt some of this feedback and question ourselves before we've even got in the room.
Yes, in that way. The feedback comes from other people, and they are not only speaking from themselves, but they know each other knows everyone else very well. Not only do I know Caitlin, but she knows me, and she's able to know what I am trying to do. That's a very convoluted way of saying something.
Thank you. We have some time for some more questions if you wanted to pop any into the chat. I was just going to pick up on something that you said. You said you described what you do, or the result of what you do, as product, thing, object, experience, and then we didn't hear any more of that. So I think it would be good to have a little discussion or hear about the terminology that you use to describe the results of what you do.
Gosh. Well, I think we make pieces, but I think some of us were, I think I was a little bit reticent in calling the things that I was doing in the lockdown jams pieces. They felt more like studies. So yes, just got to think about that.
Yeah, I think results could have been another word there. I think this kind of terminology and sort of uncertainty about terminology is sort of a reflection of the process we've been through making this presentation, that it did start off just a very casual conversation and kind of things just popping up, and then to refine that down and sort of try to find some other way to shape that in post-production, much like with the pieces. I think that's sort of an aspect of that, and that there are many different ways to describe things. Yeah.
We're also producing videos that were videos of live pieces, so or documentation we were producing. So
Yeah.
One.
Yeah, it starts to get all a bit blurred in the same way that the rehearsal becomes the performance, and then maybe edited in post-production. The thing itself is kind of fluid. Sort of, is it a piece? You know, hide and space opera is a piece and an environment and an experience. Yeah, it becomes quite confusing and messy in a joyous way.
Yeah, a good question.
Thank you for expanding on that one. So Grant has a question. Do you think that despite the separation of virtual getting together, that there is in any way that your minds actually do meet to an extent?
I think we absolutely do.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it all came together quite easily, actually. I think. I mean, and yes, obviously there were frustrations because sometimes you do just want to be in the room, and but I think we just, I mean, we started it very, very casually. I mean, that was the very first session that you saw in that first example, the Hangouts Jam #1. Yeah, and it just started out as sort of messing around, and we sort of developed this process as we went along, and definitely it was a case of minds meeting, do the thing, record it, chop out this bit, release it, and we were, because we understand each other so well, it fills in a lot of the gaps that I think you might find if you didn't know each other to that extent. If the people working together were trying to sort of negotiate something as well, but we don't have to do that. I mean, we're in several interviews, this question of how we're sometimes terribly rude to each other has come up, and we've sort of described what we have as a family vibe, and that there's a lot of history and a lot of personal connection that smooths over a lot of the sort of rougher bits about and some of the gaps caused by meeting in this way.
I think the point about the voices, we hear each other's voices in our heads, is very true. I think so. To that extent, in some way, we do carry parts of each other with us at all times.
Thank you. And we've got one last question from Sean, which is an excellent question. Is there anything from the past 18 months or so that will hang on in your practice, or is this very much just a passing fancy because of the circumstance?
We were desperate to try and include some discussion on this in our presentation, but there just wasn't time. But I think both of us, but Caitlin and I, have got very interested in Mozilla and Blender and a sort of 3D animation world and how we can use that. I have certainly learned a lot about colouring video and other post-production things. Caitlin sort of spearheaded the post-production part of all the jams and getting a YouTube version and an Instagram version, putting the titles on. I've got noise, sorry. So I think we're going to definitely carry those things forward. It's funny, Ed definitely didn't. Ed isn't as proud of this sort of body of work as we are. He didn't sort of see it as a major event for us, which is interesting. But Caitlin and I definitely.
Yeah, Tim also is not a huge fan, but I think we all accept that there's, we are talking about how we can pull this in, how we can rehearse online before meeting in person, start to try out ideas like this because we've built up ways of working. I've been very interested in telematic performance virtual music since the early 2000s. I've actually performed in a performance of William Duckworth's Cathedral in, I think it was 2003, 2002, something like that, as a laptop performer. And just couldn't get into it because I didn't have the tech at the time. So for me, it's like, finally! And I've really enjoyed working in Mozilla Hubs as well, and sort of working with virtual reality. It really taps into that visual side of my practice to be able to fully, make environments like this that really fully use these visual materials. So I think there's a lot, really an awful lot, that is going to keep turning up in my work, and definitely going to be keeping on working with video, which I was doing before anyway, but now I'm more practiced at it.
I haven't told you this yet, but I was quite interested in what a 4-on-1 kind of one audience, 4 of us on Zoom experience would be like. I think it'd be quite interesting.
We should definitely do that.
Well, thank you so much, Caitlin and Josh. That's really insightful discussion. And now we are going to move on to Joe and Casey. And just bear with me while I grab some of the questions.
Okay, thanks everyone.
So this is one from Alistair. Says, interested in the processes of compression and the other techniques you mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of the work?
Sure, I'll take this one, Casey. I used, so after we recorded in Jamulus, I imported everything into Ableton and used basically only 3 or 4 methods of processing, just panning, compression, some reverb and a little EQ at a couple points. The panning process was, I wanted to have something that wasn't spread out super wide like you might experience in a real concert hall if we were both just actually physically in the space, but I didn't want it totally panned down the center. I thought about having us directly in the center so that you could hear a little bit more of some of the rhythmic interplay that was happening. But then I sort of ended up deciding on, we decided on slightly panned. So somewhere in between what you might hear in the real world and just some sort of artificial computer version of it, that I think you can hear some of the rhythmic dissonance that happens in the performance, but it's still split up a bit. In terms of compression, there were some moments that we were recording, if you like, the raw audio is very difficult to listen to because we get loud. I love the piece is set up to get loud, and we were playing that way. And I think it would be, if we were playing that way in a concert hall, it would be super successful, and recording it would not be super successful. So a lot of it was just at these very intense moments, having the compression sort of bring things down a little bit, but then in the quieter moments near the beginning and the end, bringing those up. I was thinking about saxophone and like wind writing of somebody like Louis Andreessen or something. His professional recordings, highly compressed a lot of the time, and still, part of the art music tradition, and was thinking about that sort of thing. But compression runs all the way through. Slight reverb, just for, it was still wanted it to sort of sound like we were in the room, but not in this, like not in our wooden or not too interesting rooms. And I used a little EQ at the end because I had some sort of spit noises in my instrument, and a little EQ, I was able to bring them out without giving too much away. But yeah, those were the big processing decisions that we made, and it was a lot of it was I would send provisional edits and with processing of our rehearsals to Casey, and was like, what do you think? Does this work? And we did that a few times and sort of ended up on with that solution of the processing.
Thank you. Just a side question to that. Have you performed this piece through Zoom and Gemlist to an audience, or have you just shared the audio that you've edited and shared that with other people?
We have not performed this live just yet, and we have not performed it live in a streaming situation. We recorded it on our own, just the two of us, and made the video that was then shared as part of the recital. We just didn't want to have to deal with it. There was enough to deal with. But I think we, hopefully when things start opening up in the next year or so, we might have a chance to do this in person. I think that this could port into a in-person experience, but likely, since we are still so close to each other, we won't do a live streaming version for the time being. I think that's our plan.
So we have another question, which I'm sorry, I don't know who it's from. I didn't copy that part, but this joins with Alistair's question. You were consciously exploring audio tech, mics, headphones, etc. I wonder how much you aimed to be able to ignore the tech while performing. I'm thinking, say, of conventional studio recording practice to get a comfortable headphone feed, including own sound mixed in, reverb, etc., helping musicians feel natural, and how your own prior experience had a bearing in the studio or an amplified live sound or live electronics gigs.
You want this one, Casey?
I'll start with it and feel free to jump in. Yeah, so in my recording experience in my life, I've always preferred to have in recording, like if we're all together and really trying to get a sort of live recording experience. I think for me the experience of our sounds sort of commingling is what I really enjoy and what I've always tried to capture when performing. And so, the fact that I couldn't sort of touch, feel, Joe's sort of sound is one that I've never been as comfortable with, when I've had to multi-track some things. It's just always, even sort of trying to figure out sort of where my pitch will sit has always been a little unnerving. And so it's I don't feel like I can ever really ignore that fact. And so then, but there is also the time when, having the microphone there, especially when we were improvising, was sort of allowed for some more creative experiences. It's like, because a microphone will definitely pick up sort of the mechanism of a saxophone or a clarinet far more than an audience member will, right? Just because I'm sort of standing right on top. It's this sort of ASMR experience. So no, I would say I'm not able personally to ignore the sort of presence of technology within this experience.
We also, when we rehearsed and recorded, we didn't do any sort of provisional pre-processing at all. We were just listening to us playing the notes in the room. We also found, I found also playing with the Sonic Arts Ensemble that you couldn't monitor your own sound. You couldn't have the feed coming back of what you were playing, because it was just so off-putting to have that also in the mix, a third interloper, yourself, this other player, and then your own sound coming back a little bit later. There'd be no way to confidently try and place things. So we sort of had to sacrifice monitoring for the final product / experience, and so on. I remember even what it was in, it was Peter's presentation in the last session, where a little bit of reverb, a little delay was very strange. And so we had to sort of remove any element like that we could out of the recording and rehearsal process to try to stay together.
Thank you. So we have a question from Grant. Another theme is coupled with latency, which basically a favoured way to deal with it is to roll with it and use it, which couples with another contemporary composer's point of chance randomness. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, there's every. I feel like every instrumentation, every setup has some sort of strange, unique difficulty about it that you either try to write around or you embrace. And latency is that big thing here. And we're thinking about trying to embrace it. We thought about other contemporary composers or recently contemporary composers of the 20th century of concert music, where Casey and I are coming from a lot of the time. And we mentioned Bonita Marcus, who works with desynchronization. And also we were thinking about, there's a piece called Hout by Louis Andriessen that is 4 instruments doing a unison canon. So that was also part of the discussion at the beginning as well.
Thank you. We'll have a final question from Sean. If I remember correctly, I may have misinterpreted, you mentioned that you went on walks together during the compositional process. What impact did these walks have on the whole piece, both in terms of composition and performance, or are they auxiliary?
What do you think, Casey?
I think they did. I mean, so we would be, Potsdam's very rural. We were walking a lot, like oftentimes through the woods on these sorts of things, and with Roxy's, or with Joe's partner Roxy, and many times like our conversations would sort of center on sort of musical things and sort of what especially with us both sort of teaching, it's sort of what does this sort of delay affect in terms of our communication stuff, and and this is where I think Joe sort of embracing there being a difference in communication, between a virtual and a in-person space, and I think that did enhance sort of the ways that we were able to work together on this piece.
If I could jump on that too, I felt that, I mean, trying to do this and with this sort of set of communication and dealing with all this different hardware and software, it had the potential to be very limiting. And it had the potential to be very difficult, but us being able to see each other in person every once in a while during that same process allowed us to, cut the bullshit, so to speak, during the rehearsal every once in a while. And it's like, we didn't have to use, like there were times where, we had been trained as chamber musicians how to speak to each other, and to have that sort of on top of all this other stuff was too much to do. So we could sort of cut through it and be like, hey man, this is wrong. Hey man, this is right. This works, this doesn't work. And we didn't have to, because we knew each other as people, in addition to these entities on the screen, I believe we were able to have a closer and more meaningful collaboration as a result, definitely.
Thank you so much. There's definitely a theme here with collaboration and having a relationship with your collaborator and how this brings meaningful experiences. So thank you so much to Joe and Casey. We're going to move on to questions for Jason now. And let me just paste this in the chat. So our first is a comment from Alistair. For Jason, it's interesting how, despite the fragments of everyday speech, glitches, and iterative presentation, a narrative can be clearly identified. Jason, is that something that you want to expand on?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been really interested in as I've been working with these secrets that are generated by recurrent neural network is that, like, you start to see evidence of something that the speaker is trying to convey to you without being able to grasp specifically what that something is. Oh, am I too low? Sorry. How's that? Is that better? Sorry. Yeah. So what I was saying is one of the things that I was really excited about while working with these secrets generated by recurrent neural network is that you start to see some evidence of something that the speaker is trying to confess to you, but you don't necessarily get a clear picture of exactly or precisely what that is. And so I like this this idea about kind of giving the sense of vulnerability or openness while also erecting a wall that kind of prevents intimacy at the same time. Did that address the thing?
Thank you. So I've got a question from David here. Curious about the Flarfish text and loved how it was delivered. Algorithmic, internet generated, written, question mark.
Yeah, so the procedure for that, so I found a tutorial online that someone had developed to use TensorFlow to train a machine learning algorithm to generate Shakespeare, basically. So you feed it thousands and thousands of examples of Shakespeare text, and then it spits out words that are supposed to approximate something that Shakespeare wrote. And I adapted that by going to a Reddit forum where people will often set up these anonymous burner accounts where they can anonymously confess things that they can't necessarily confess to other people in real life. And a friend helped me to write a Python script that allowed me to quickly scrape thousands of these anonymous secrets that people had posted. And then I fed that into TensorFlow, and that text is the computer's attempt to, given the rules of what a human secret looks like, this is what I've got for you. So early on in that process, I had been manually collecting these secrets, and I only got like 200 or something, and it didn't have enough information to know what a secret was supposed to sound like. So it gave me a lot of nonsense. And then once we got up into feeding thousands of these confessions in, it was able to give us something more closely resembling intelligible human speech. So that's where those pieces of text came from.
Thank you. That's really interesting. That was going to be one of the questions that I was going to ask as well. I have another question, which is to do with the use of the doorbell technology. So this is you said it was a series. How have you explored this in the other parts of the series? Is it quite similar, or do you explore something different?
Yeah, so it's similar. Some of them are playing a little bit more with the feedback of the microphones and the speakers built into the Ring doorbell. So some of the pieces I've constructed drones out of those feedback tones, and that features more prominently.
Thank you. I think, do you have links for any of those? I think it would be
Yeah,
great to have
yeah,
them in the chat for all of us to
yeah.
look at later. You don't have to do it right now. But we have time for one more question. Does anyone have a question in the chat? Oh, thank you, Jason.
And I should also mention what the first piece in that series. It was part of a festival, a new music festival in Omaha, Nebraska, called Omaha Under the Radar. And I had originally proposed a collaborative performance that was going to involve these computer generated secrets. That was supposed to happen last summer. And of course, that festival got canceled. So what they ended up proposing instead is giving people silent films to create scores for. And so the first piece in this series was a score that I recorded on the Ring doorbell for a silent film. And this the silent film that they happened to give me was it was a very, very early film of just someone recording themselves in a boat going down the Hudson River, like at the beginning of film technology. And so I was sort of interested in the way that, you know, this is this mundane video recording that kind of shows the potential and the flaws of what at the time was cutting edge technology. And because we're in COVID lockdown and we can't travel, instead what was happening was I was stationary looking out of what is now sort of a cutting edge technology, watching the world pass by. sort of parallel. So that would be another different way of engaging with that technology. So.
Oh, thank you. So we have one final question from Sean. It's about the text. Do you edit the text at all, or are they very much in their raw form?
So what I've done with some of these pieces, I try to edit them as little as possible. So a lot of times what I'll do is I will pick out phrases that I think convey something important about what the piece is about. So like the "I have been a Loveheim" phrase, I thought was a phrase that gave a sense of some sort of emotional connection or familial intimacy. And so I might pull that phrase out and use that as a title or something like that. In some of the pieces, I have taken recordings of my voice and turned those into sampler instruments that I'm trying to perform along with. So I'm not consciously editing the text, but reacting to whatever the system provides me with. So I'm trying to edit things as little as possible.